Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Kescast. It's quite an interesting episode, I think, one of our first ones in this new academic year, in which we have a Year 11 with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Fraser. I'm in 11E.
And what have you... tell us slightly more about why you're on the Kescast this week.
Well, I'm here because I've written in my spare time a book which I'm now hoping to get published. It's called Magecraft, and it's a fantasy book which follows these 6 young adults as they try to come to terms with and develop the magical abilities that they've been born with, and while they try to combat an uprising which threatens to sort of tear down their nation and kill everyone they love.
Interesting. Sounds very full of action, to say the least.
Mm.
What would you say sort of inspired you to write a book like this? Especially at such a young age as well.
Yeah, I'd say primarily boredom, to be honest. I've always had sort of these characters floating around that I'd thought of in a sort of basic world that they would exist in, but I'd never really put it to paper.
Yeah.
And then at one point I was so sort of bored, I got absolutely nothing to do, so I thought, why not write something?
Year 11's nothing to do. Ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was in year 10 at the time.
Oh, fair enough, yeah.
You know, we weren't exactly not busy then, but I was so bored that I thought, why not write something about it, seeing as I have them floating around, and then it just started to sort of develop into something a lot bigger than what I originally planned, to be honest.
Fair enough. Interesting. So, when during year 10 would you say that these ideas really started coming to paper?
Well, I know I started writing in May.
Of this year?
May of this year. Very late May. I think it was the 26th. That's when I, first started, but I finished it, I'm still adding to it and editing and stuff, this August. So very late year 10 and through the summer holidays, mainly.
Fair enough. So, when did you start... I know you said you started thinking about these characters long before you put them to paper. Can you tell us a little bit more maybe about these characters, just sort of give us a rough outline of the characters?
I suppose there are really 7 main characters in the book. One of them is a captain in the army.
Right. And
he's captain of the sort of garrison of a city from which another of the main characters is from. Mm-hmm. And his sort of storyline is mainly trying to defend that city and figure out, what the hell is going on with, there are sort of terrorist attacks going on and people rioting. And the other 7 characters are all, they've all been born with magical talent. The person who takes them in is this incredibly old, sort of nigh omnipotent, unbelievably powerful wizard, I suppose, if that's the correct term. I know there's specific subclasses of people who can use magic, but I've never really got into it.
Fair enough.
And he's a sort of guiding force for them as they try and learn about what they can do. And he's a sort of gateway into a lot of the history of the world, because him and the other people like him, there's 5 other like him. They've been around since the beginning of that world's history. Mm-hmm. So it's through him that you learn a lot about the culture of the world and how their sort of nation came to be. And the other 6 characters are all teenagers, so they're kind of... I want to say they're sort of the people the audience would sympathise with the most.
Yeah, are you looking for a sort of... What kind of demographic are we aiming for?
Definitely young adult, maybe, I suppose, my age.
Yeah. So 15, 16?
Yeah, 15, 16, because that's where the sort of main character is right now.
Cool. So what kind of... I know you said you've had these characters knocking around for a while, but what's kind of... like, what inspiration, particularly fantastical inspiration, would you say that you've drawn on in the process of writing this book?
There's a lot of... I mean, we're sort of inspired by everything we read, but I'd say... it's kind of hard to pin it down. I don't want to say Harry Potter, because I know people draw comparisons, you know, someone goes to learn about magic and fights bad people, but there's an element of that in it. And I also started reading the Game of Thrones series part way through writing it, so I suppose that would have influenced me slightly, although I don't think of myself as George R.R. Martin.
No,
his work is a lot darker and full of death and all sorts of nasty stuff.
Themes that we won't go into on an
probably
English
shouldn't.
podcast.
No.
A classic. So you'd say you've always sort of been interested in this fantasy genre then?
Yeah.
And then this sort of would lead to writing the book?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I've always... It's sci-fi and fantasy mainly, you know, because there's a lot of... You know, the stuff we read in English is not really the most interesting. Well, I don't want to say that because it's an English podcast, but...
You'll have people outside your house with pitchforks and torches.
It will be a sort of anti-book burning. But the stuff we read in English is all very realistic. You know, it takes place in 18th century London, you know, 19th century wherever Inspector Calls takes place. It's all very sort of grounded, so I like to read stuff which is sort of, I suppose, unrealistic, to get that taste of, you know, something which, although it could never happen realistically, it's still very much fun to imagine.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was hoping to go with the story. You know, there's no heavy themes in it. There's no sort of social commentary. It's just a sort of fun, exciting book about some people with magic.
Fair enough. So just something a little bit more light-hearted in, I guess, the sort of age of depressing.
There are a couple of dark sections, like you know, the very old wizard who I was talking about earlier. He's had to go through a load of stuff with his brother who died long ago because of him, in a way. And there's, you know, like I said, there's a religious uprising, and they don't like magic users at all, to the point where they kill them ritually. So there is darkness in there, but there's also a lot of sort of light-hearted fun, and, you know, it's teenagers with the power to sort of bend the world, and you can't really imagine a way that would go other than sort of sarcastic humour. Yeah. Because they're teenagers and we all know what they're like.
We do. So, you say you're looking to get this book published. What was the easiest and the hardest parts, I'd say, of your creative process and the writing of this book?
Of writing it? Well, I'd say the problem was I didn't really start off with a storyline. I didn't think, okay, I want this, and this to happen. Yeah. So in a way, I kind of had to, while I was writing it, think, where do I want this to go, and what do I want to happen in it? So I suppose coming up with a story would have been the hardest part, but that's kind of vague.
No, fair enough.
I wouldn't really say there's a hardest part to writing. You know, if you enjoy it, and if you're writing about things which you really are into, it's not hard at all. You know, there are people who... I mean, I've done it in my free time without hoping really to get any reward from it. It's just something I find fun. So I wouldn't say there is a hard part necessarily of writing it. Yeah. Publishing is a whole different story.
No, fair enough. Yeah. So I guess... I had a question. I lost it.
Sorry.
No, it's alright. No, it's also new. What kind of advice would you give to anyone who's listening who may want to write a book in their free time as well?
I would say that the best thing to think is not I want to write a book. It's to think I want to tell this story. So you shouldn't like sit down at a desk and think, okay, I'm going to write a book, because that's such a nebulous thing that goes from everything to War and Peace to, you know, The Hungry Caterpillar. There's so much in between.
Very true.
Writing a book is very easy if you have a group of characters which you really enjoy writing for, and a story which you personally are interested in. I suppose the best thing to think is, you know, no one has to read it. You shouldn't be worried about quality or whether it would be engaging or fun to read. As long as you are enjoying writing it, that's really what matters. And all the stuff about quality and even basic things like punctuation, they can wait because it's you writing the book.
Yeah.
So
enough.
the best thing, I suppose, is to just have fun with it.
Yeah, nice. I like that sentiment. Yeah, I think anything else you really want to add to any of that?
I would say that it's often sort of... I think it is important, if you're not going to write something, that you should definitely read something, because the English GCSE is not very stimulating in terms of what really... It's all very heavy, and some of it is... I'm sure anyone who's going through the GCSE would agree with me right now, it's not actually that great to read if you're a teenager. So I think keeping that sort of literary aspect in your life, whether you're writing or reading, is very important, because otherwise you can just think, oh, I've got all I can read is, Great Expectations or whatever, which is a particularly sort of painful book to read if you don't enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is fair enough. Right, I think that's just about everything said. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
And Magecraft, I believe.
Yes, Magecraft. That's a working title. Copyright issues might come into that later, depending on how publishing goes.
Fair enough. Right then, so coming to all good qualified bookstores near you, hopefully soon.
Hopefully in 2020, because if it isn't done by then, it'll have been a year, and that will have been quite a long process. But yeah, hopefully.
No, fair enough. Hopefully get a couple copies in the library very soon.
That would be flattering.
Great, thank you very much.
Right, thank you.